I'm Stephanie Filardi. Welcome to Mind the Gap, the podcast. I believe many people fall short of living the life of their dreams simply because they get stuck in what I call the gap. The vision behind this podcast is to help you understand how to navigate the gap and in the process, awaken to the life that is waiting for you. It starts now. Let's go. Welcome to the podcast, Mind the Gap. It's nice to have you back. Let's take a moment to breathe. 3 conscious breaths. Wherever you are, take a moment to inhale and then exhale out of your mouth. Let it go. Again, inhale, filling up. Exhale, release and let go. And then one more time, big breath in, filling up. And then big exhale out of the mouth, let it go with a ha. Today's topic is relationships. You might need to take another breath after I said the word relationships. So the intention is to speak about relationships in terms of the transitions that all of us who are living face. Some of the transitions we experience in relationship, entering relationships, exiting relationships, and also some of the emotions we may experience. I recognize this might be a sensitive topic for some, and I invite you to listen with an open mind and with an open heart, no matter what your relationship experience has been. In my own work, in my own life, as well as my work with clients, I recognize that many of us experience at some point in time stress as it relates to relationships. It could be anything from the stress of a relationship ending, so whether it's a divorce or a death. It could be relationships that end because we want them to and it's healthy, or perhaps we had no control. Other examples of transitions in relationships are about new relationships. So maybe it's that new love or it's a marriage. And oftentimes when we go through these relationship changes, even when it's happy and wonderful, such as a marriage or a new beginning, we also may find ourselves challenged by what that comes with. So for example, in-laws, or maybe a friend group or a work group. So the intention behind this podcast is to have a real conversation with you about what actually happens to us and how sometimes we get caught. So we get stuck in that place that I call the gap when we go through these beginnings and endings. Before I talk a little bit more deeply about the topic, something in my own life that I have found to be profoundly helpful is this question that I ask myself, which is, what is the point of a relationship? Like, what is really my view of relationships? And when I speak of the word relationships, I mean all relationships, not just the romantic loved ones, all of them. So whether they're with our family, our friends, our coworkers, in life, everything to me is about relationships. And I feel that it's the one area of life that perhaps we don't learn about in school. It's something that many of us have to learn about on our own. So when I look at relationships, I truly feel that relationships are teachers. I really believe that everybody who comes into my life, from the family that I was born into, to the love relationships that I've had, to other relationships that extend from that, are an opportunity to learn about myself. Now, I've shared on other podcasts that I meditate. I do like a fair amount of alone time. However, my best learning and growth has actually come from being in relationships and from being in the most challenging relationships. Yes. So, the human tendency is to avoid what we perceive as pain. And when I speak of challenging relationships, I'm speaking of relationships that really provoke us to grow. A quote that I'm going to share with you now to kind of set the stage for this comes from A Course in Miracles, and it says, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." I'm going to say it again. So really listen with your heart. Maybe if you're in a situation where you can close your eyes, of course you're not driving or doing anything. So just take a moment to take these words in once again. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So that quote, of course, can be applied to any area of our life where we perceive it as a challenge. So part of this conversation and this podcast, this opportunity to awaken, is to really help us learn how to see something with new eyes. It doesn't mean we deny the difficulty, or in situations if there's abuse of any kind. It's not denying what is. It's looking at the situation, instead of looking at it as an obstacle, it's transmuting that into an opportunity. So as it relates to relationships, when I look at relationships in general, I see them as teachers, and I see them as opportunities to learn more about myself, and quite frankly, to learn more about how to love myself. I have found in speaking with people, especially in my shamanic energy healing practice, oftentimes people come to me and they're longing for love. So they're longing for either a deepening of their current love relationship, or perhaps they've recently gotten out of a relationship that was no longer working for them, and they're really looking for this deep soul love connection. And in my experience, that deep loving soul connection starts with loving ourselves. So when we're able to look at relationships as teachers and as an opportunity to learn and to grow, what ends up happening in the process is that we actually learn how to love ourselves. We actually learn how to say, wait a second, this doesn't serve me. I need to speak up, or I need to take a rest today. So it gives us the opportunity to really figure out and nourish what it is that we need. And when we do that, we're actually better able to love somebody else. So as I speak today on this podcast, I encourage you, in the moments when maybe you're noticing yourself kind of pointing a finger at somebody else, or saying, oh, well, only if that person was this or that, just take a moment to pause and say, well, what can I do? Right? So Gandhi said, be the change. Be the change. And several years ago, when I was going through one of my yoga teacher trainings, it was a transformational module, which I love. So it was the deep dive work where I knew I was going to be provoked and challenged, and I signed up for it because I was afraid. And I realized if I keep going towards the things that I am afraid of, eventually I'll have a lot less fear and a lot more fun and freedom. So I signed up for this transformational module, and one of the invitations from the teacher was to spend a year in a love experiment. So we were encouraged to choose someone in our life who was really hard to love, someone in our life who we had contact with. So this was someone who was still alive, someone that we had to engage with. So perhaps it was a family member, right? Or someone in our life that we were close to. And he gave us the challenge to really love them unconditionally. Unconditionally, meaning without condition, no matter what. And I took the challenge, and I, over the course of the 12 months, learned how to love myself. And in the process, learned how to love this other person unconditionally. It didn't mean that I didn't get upset at times, or was frustrated, or wanted to give up. What it did mean was that it continued to help me grow. It helped me realize the amount of attachment, expectation, and judgment that I place on other people, and in particular, this person. And what I realized was that I placed that same amount of attachment, expectation, and judgment on myself. So this is the part of the conversation where it comes back to accepting our feelings, right? So what I have learned is that we experience the full range of human emotion. All of us do. However, the difference is that some of us accept it, honor it, and acknowledge it, and some of us don't because we're terrified. And I've done all of it. It took me many years to get angry, and I still have a hard time getting angry because I am the peaceful, loving yogi, right? So I need to always be happy and loving and kind. Well, that doesn't always work in the world. Sometimes you need to get angry because anger is a sign that maybe something is out of alignment. But truly, the anger being expressed in a healthy way is a teacher, right? So if I'm in relationship with somebody, as an example, and I'm expressing what my needs are, I need to be heard or I need to be understood, and I feel that the person completely is either disinterested or unwilling, then I have the right to get angry. That's a healthy emotion. So part of this process over that year where I was engaged in this love experiment of loving this person unconditionally taught me how to get angry. It taught me how to communicate from a loving place, which is another part of this relationship conversation is communication. And this goes across, again, all relationships. I call it conscious communication. And many of us are not taught how to express our feelings in a way that's healthy. So some of us have grown up in situations where maybe we've seen a complete repression of emotions. Others may have grown up in a situation where it's been explosive and dramatic, right? So the intention behind the conscious communication is to come to a place of balance where we're able to speak about how we're feeling from a place of presence and also from a place of love. So over the course of the year where I was involved with this love experiment with this individual, I was able to have conversations from a place of love. So when this person perhaps acted what I will call unconsciously, so when someone does something that I feel is hurtful, instead of blaming them, I give them the benefit of the doubt and say that perhaps it was just unconscious. They didn't realize it because I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they wouldn't do it intentionally. So when I was in this experiment and something would happen where I would find myself getting triggered by this individual, instead of perhaps withdrawing, which was a tendency of mine, avoiding, not wanting to deal, or perhaps if I was really pushed to the limit, exploding, which quite frankly neither feel good and neither solve anything, I was able to take the time to disengage from what happened. So I took the space to process what happened. And then I was able to discern what's really going on here. Is this something that I really am getting upset about that's valid, that's legitimate, or is this just an old pattern? And once I was clear on that, by taking the space and by discerning what was really happening, I was able to make a decision about, is this a conversation that I need to have? So I will give you an example in a moment. So once you're able to take some space to discern what's going on, then you can make a decision, a conscious choice about how you're going to respond instead of react, and then you take action. One of my favorite words is this podcast is also about helping you to get back into a place of action. Coming from a place of consciousness, coming from a place of love, coming from a place where the actions that you're taking are creating more situations that are going to support your growth. So this situation was this individual that I was dealing with had a tendency of sometimes hanging up on me when they didn't like an answer. So like, let's say I was asked to do something and I said, no, I'm not able to do that. This person would take it very personally and hang up on me. And I experienced this behavior for many, many years. So to me, it was kind of normal. It was kind of like, oh, okay, they hung up on me. And I just kind of, I would feel badly. I would withdraw. And then I would end up talking myself out of it, saying, okay, well, maybe they were just having a bad day and I need to be the bigger person. And, just all that stuff. I'm a loving person. I'm a yogi. I meditate. I have all these tools. I can, blow it into my crystal, burn some incense. So blah, 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 blah. Until it actually just started to feel bad. And it actually started to feel like abusive. So what I decided to do, I decided that the next time that happened, which of course I knew it would, I decided that I was going to have a different response. So like clockwork, it happened. I was on the phone. I said no, and I got hung up on. So I let it happen. A few hours later, I called this person back and I said, hi, I have something to share with you. Is this a good time? And I got the yes. I got yes. So I proceeded from a very calm state. I had written out what I wanted to say. And basically what I said was, earlier today when we were speaking and I said no, you hung up on me. That really hurt. I feel that you love me. And when you hung up on me, it actually made me feel like you didn't love me. So it confused me. It didn't make sense to me. It actually made me feel pretty bad. So I understand perhaps you were having a bad day or you were frustrated. I understand that. However, I ask that if you're not having a good day, that perhaps it's best not to call me because I don't deserve that. And I really believe that you didn't mean it. And that if you really knew how much it hurt me, that you wouldn't do it. So I'm going to ask that when you are feeling that way, that perhaps it's best not to call me, and that if I say no, that you honor and respect my choices. And if you don't, I'd actually rather not speak with you at all. I love you very much, and I appreciate your understanding. So, was I shaking having the conversation? Absolutely. Was it massively uncomfortable for me? Absolutely. It was the first time with this individual that I was able to own my power and use my voice. And I did it from a very loving and calm way. The person ended up apologizing, and the relationship at that point started to take a different turn. So it started to take a different turn in that behavior since that time happened one other time when it used to happen on a fairly regular basis. So the reason why I share that with you is because I know that all of us, no matter what kind of relationships we have, at some point in time have to face people who perhaps are disrespectful, who maybe drain our energy, who perhaps just don't understand or respect us as people. A couple things I'll say about that is that it's not personal. I know that's hard when it's being directed at us to feel that it's not personal, but it's not personal. So if you can remember that perhaps will help you take the time and space you need to disengage and to discern what's really happening, right? The other thing to remember is that it's really easy to get caught up in the drama and the negativity and the fighting, so to speak. And at the end of the day, in my experience, it only makes us feel worse. So sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to do nothing, is to say nothing, is to literally disengage, meaning separate ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever we can do until we're really clear on what's happening, until we get to that place where we feel calm and we feel loving and we're able to express ourselves from a place of clarity and compassion. So that's my example, one of many, of really being able to look at a relationship in my life that I had struggled with, that was very painful at times, but a relationship that I really wanted to do this love experiment with because it was with a person that I did want in my life, right? And believe me, there have been times when I questioned, do I want this person in my life? And there were very real moments where I said no. But ultimately, if we are choosing to be in relationship with people, then we have to learn how to navigate those relationships. And the most important thing I can say is the relationship you have with yourself and how you want to show up. And in life, I know that I want to show up from a place of love, and that when I leave an encounter with somebody, I want to add to their day. I don't want to take away from their day. It doesn't mean I have to be loving and doting. Maybe it's just being silent. Maybe it's being simply smiling. But whatever it is for you, I encourage you to start to think about that. Maybe there is a relationship in your life that you're struggling with, and maybe the invitation for you today in terms of taking action is to say, okay, how can I do a love experiment with this person? Maybe it's 7 days. It doesn't have to be a year. But how can you perhaps step back and change the way you look at the relationship? So looking at it from a larger view as an opportunity to learn something about yourself. So instead of making it about them and what they do and how they make you feel, what do you need? What do you need to feel good? What do you need to feel good? So that is my invitation for you today, is to take a look at your life, look at your relationships, maybe find a relationship that you're struggling with that's been a challenge, and see how you can unconditionally love this person for 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, whatever works for you, and try it. And I'll be honest, when I tried this love experiment, I committed to 30 days. And I said, I'll do it for 30 days because my brain and my heart needed to know I could have an out. And that's perfectly normal and acceptable. And it's healthy. So be in tune with yourself. The last thing I want to say is, in my life, I have been blessed to have a handful of relationships, love relationships. So people that I've seen married, and also just people that are, single, who really have, I guess, modeled unconditional love. So loved me no matter what, and were always there for me. So, and not all of them are blood relations. Actually, most of them were not. So if you have people like that in your life, think of them, channel their energy, learn from them, watch them. It could be a public figure. It doesn't matter who it is. The point is, the people in life who we are most attracted to, whether because we admire them or because they annoy us, you have the most to learn from. So this isn't all about negative relationships and challenges, although that's where most of us get stuck in the gap and lose energy and life force, and then we miss out on our own life. We also can learn from people who do it really well. So I encourage you to keep those people in mind, and maybe even ask yourself, what would they do? How would they respond? That's the invitation. Your life is precious. Don't waste your time. Invest it in yourself. Invest it in people who teach you how to be better. Get the support you need and have fun with it. As I mentioned, relationships are one of my favorite topics. And I believe mostly because I've spent a lot of time studying, learning, and I want people to be happy. I know that sounds like a very lofty, idealistic goal, but it's legitimate. It's a lot more enjoyable to be around people that like themselves and like each other. So I guess there's a selfishness piece in that too, in that I really feel that a lot of people struggle because they're not willing to maybe look at themselves and take responsibility. Having said that, I want to encourage you, if you have a story to share or you'd like to be a guest, because this conversation about relationships is going to continue. So if you would like to join the podcast as a guest, or you have a contribution, or you have a question about something I've said or something you're interested in learning about, or you have a success story, anything at all that moves you, if I've moved you in some way, and also if I've pissed you off, that's cool too. I'll take that because that's where we learn. Then I encourage you to email me at Stephanie@bronxvillewellness.com. That's Stephanie, STEPHANIE at Bronxville Wellness, BRONXVILLE wellness.com. And don't worry, I will respect your privacy. If you do not want to be known, not a problem. That's all. Let's go. So I love this quote. It reminds me of what is required of us to do in order to have healthy, happy relationships. When we can no longer hide behind a role, we are pushed to present ourselves and then run the risk of real intimacy. And that's by Ann Wilson. I'm going to read it again. When we can no longer hide behind a role, we are pushed to present ourselves and then run the risk of real intimacy. And the way I like to think of the word intimacy is into me I see. So the ability to get present, to be authentic with ourselves, and then to be able to show that to those in our life we care about without hiding behind victim, rescuer, woe is me, whatever the story is, our job, our function in the world, who we think we are, who we want to be seen as. When we can truly be vulnerable and open ourselves and show others who we are, that is when the real relationship begins.
Beautiful.
I'm Stephanie Filardi. Welcome to Mind the Gap, the podcast. I believe many people fall short of living the life of their dreams simply because they get stuck in what I call the gap. The vision behind this podcast is to help you understand how to navigate the gap and in the process, awaken to the life that is waiting for you. It starts now. Let's go. Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining today. Let us begin with our 3 conscious breaths. So inhale, filling the belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale, open your mouth, let it out, make some sounds. Again, inhale, filling up, belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale and let it go. And one more time. Inhale, filling up, belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale, release, let go, surrender. So today's conversation is a continuation of episode 3 where I talked about relationships. And the reason why I'm bringing this back is because it has been has been the most popular of all of the episodes. And I am not surprised because no matter what we do in life, everything is relational, right? So whether it's at home or at work or in our day-to-day, we cannot avoid people. Well, most of us cannot avoid people, and not for too long. So this juicy topic of relationships is something that I personally love, and I want to talk about healthy relationships today. So as always, I like us to start with an intention. So even as I'm speaking now and you're hearing me say the word relationship, I'm wondering if there's something that's coming up in your body, if there's a feeling or if there's a thought of, some of you might be feeling absolutely blissful, maybe you're in wonderful, loving relationships, or maybe some of you are having a different experience and maybe there's some challenges. And then of course, there's always the in-between. So maybe some relationships are working and other relationships aren't working. So again, beginning this practice and this conversation with an awareness of where you are here and now today. Because it's easy sometimes to get caught in the trap of looking to the past or projecting into the future when really all we have is this present moment. So taking a moment and being true with yourself, being authentic with yourself about how are you doing in the area of relationships. You could be focusing on maybe there's a certain specific relationship in your life, or maybe relationships in general. And what I have found is that how we do one thing in life is how we do many things. So just noticing that. Now, in our most intimate relationships, sometimes it's more challenging, right, than some of the superficial relationships. Because in our intimate relationships, we usually get more triggered. Because why? Because there's more growth opportunity. And I spoke about that in episode 3. If you look at relationships as a way to grow, then you will grow. And if you look to relationships simply for fulfillment, to make me happy, most likely you will be disappointed. So why is that? Well, there's a few things. I talked about happiness in episode 19 and if it's a choice. And I think a lot of the expectation that we place upon ourselves and on relationship to make us happy comes from maybe what we're hearing around us or some of just the collective thoughts about what it should be, perhaps how relationships are portrayed in the movies. So I think this is an opportunity to really get real with yourself and just think about not only the quality of your relationships in your life, but what is the relationship you have with yourself? What is the relationship you have with yourself? Because in my experience, unless we really understand that everything comes from who we are being, then really nothing in the outer world can change for very long. So noticing what is the relationship you have with yourself. And some people are wise enough to know that unless they love themselves, it becomes challenging to love another person. So that's part of this conversation is really, looking at what are the ways that you take care of yourself? How do you talk to yourself? How do you treat yourself? Are you important in your life? So it's an opportunity to learn about how you're being with yourself, because how you're being with yourself is often how you're going to be with somebody else. So thinking about relationships, there's a lot of people that want to have that perfect, let's say 10 relationship, right? They want to have that perfect 10 relationship where they feel supported and loved, and maybe it's juicy and romantic, and there's a true partnership, and there's a lot of joy, and we have each other's back, and we feel good all the time. And the question that I have to ask you is, if you want to have that level of relationship, do you currently have that level of relationship with yourself? Because if we want to have an authentic, positive, supportive, fun, juicy, loving relationship with somebody else in our life, we must have that relationship with ourselves first. And when we have that relationship with ourselves first and we cultivate that, we learn the tools, we learn the skills that we can extend to somebody else. So let me be specific. So there are many times in life where we fall into, let's say, the victim role, right? Why is this happening to me? And we make it all about us, or I want to be happy. Well, when we do that in relationship with other people, it's actually quite destructive because it kicks up a bunch of emotions and feelings that often can destroy the very thing that we seek. So let's say, for example, one of the things that we know about ourselves is that we are controlling for whatever reason, right? We've talked about this before. Let's say controlling and judgmental, right? So we like to have things a certain way. We don't like too many surprises. When things don't go our way, maybe there's a tendency to blame or to feel bad, basically to go into that victim role. So when we find ourselves in relationship and something isn't going our way, maybe somebody disappoints us, or maybe somebody made a promise that they were not able to keep for another reason, for some sort of a reason. The tendency might be to go into this victim, right? Or to go into blame or shame or guilt. And a lot of times that comes down to wanting to be right. wanting to be right. So a lot of these concepts are pretty ingrained and conditioned. And when we're the type of person who wants to be in control, really we want to be right. And we want to be right because we want to feel safe. And we want to feel safe because maybe at some point in our life we didn't. So what I have to share with you about that is if you are able to recognize in yourself, in your life, where you want to be right and where you want to feel safe, and if you're able to recognize that you are the only person that can do that for yourself, you will notice how your relationships will change so that when your partner does something to, quote, disappoint you or let you down, your whole world doesn't have to fall apart. It doesn't have to ruin your day, your week, your month, your year. So instead of falling into the victim role, we can actually say, what was my part in this? Did I have a part in this? And use it as an opportunity to learn not only about the other person and what they might be going through, but also about the resources that we have within ourselves to be there for ourselves and to cultivate that feeling of safety within ourselves. And I don't want to get too deep here because a lot of these things that come up, these patterns that come up in our relationships are connected to things that happened when we were children. So then we become adults, but yet there's still that inner child that is not healed or has these triggers. So the thing that I want to say about, being right is, would you rather be right or be happy? Right? I think at some point in time in life, we get to a place where we simply want to love the people we're with instead of judging them. And I've had this experience in my life, and, it's quite profound when you recognize that, first of all, that maybe you are being that judging critic. And I don't know that we do it on purpose. So this is a conversation that is rooted in compassion and authenticity, as always. But if we walk around being critical of people and judging people, it's likely we've done that to ourselves, and we do that to ourselves first. So it's an extension of who we are that we project onto other people. Yet if we walk around life like that, who wants to be around that? Right? Do you want to be around somebody who you feel is always judging you or criticizing you? And it doesn't mean that we don't call each other out and hold each other accountable. It means that we have to take a step back and try to understand, right? So this place of awareness. So this is part of me kind of encouraging you to think about not only what it is that you do in your own life currently, but what kind of a relationship do you want to have with the people in your life, with your family, with your parents, with your siblings, with your children, with your significant other? Those are the primary ones. And then from there, we extend out, right, to friends and coworkers. But our inner circle, the people that we love the most, are often the ones that trigger us the most. And there's a reason for that. And it's because we care. If we didn't care, we wouldn't care, right? So sometimes the person we love the most, we can sometimes feel like it's the same person that we hate, right? And hate is a strong word, so I want to say dislike. And oftentimes the person that we fell in love with them because they were lighthearted and free and fun. And maybe a few years into it, we're like, wow, but they're not that serious. And we start judging them because they are that way. So it's really fascinating, this whole journey of relationships. And I will continue to talk about it in future episodes and unwind it a little bit more. But for now, I want you to think about, especially again, this time of year, the holidays, the end of the year, maybe having yourself, take some time to recognize, where are you in relationship? Where are you in relationship with yourself? Where are you in relationship with other? And what is your intention? What kind of relationships do you want to have in your life? I can tell you for myself, what's important to me is to have people in my life who are authentic, who are positive, who are supportive, who are willing to call me out and hold me accountable on my stuff. People who have a vision for their life, who enjoy life. It doesn't mean things are always going well and it's not about perfection, but to have people in your life who are authentic and true is a really powerful way to live in this world. So think about that. And the other thing I want you to think about, so in addition to the intentions, right? The intentions, what type of a relationship do you want to have? Think about maybe some of the patterns that you have noticed within your own relationship. So do you go into that victim role, or do you go into the rescue role? Some of us want to fix people, right? And we know that we cannot change anyone. It is hard enough for us to change. So we cannot fix or change anyone. What we can do is believe in people and love them. And that's it. So that's also part of those triggers around control, right? We think that once we're in a relationship, if we love them enough or we do enough for them, that maybe they'll heal, right? Maybe they'll heal that wound or that addiction or that problem that they're having. And the reality is that's not the reality. So I say that with all due respect and really considering, what are the patterns that you notice in your life? What shows up for you in relationship? Are there patterns or people that you continue to attract? Because sometimes we think it's outside of us and that this is, again, the story of victim. I always attract this type of person, or every time I show up, this is what happens. And that's a story that's based on an underlying belief. And the way the universe works is that if you keep putting that out there, you're going to keep getting it. And I've said this a few different ways before, because our thoughts really do become things. And the tricky thing about thoughts is that our thoughts are actually informed by our beliefs. So unless you really do the work of understanding what your beliefs are, you actually can't change your thoughts, because so much of this is conditioned and it's unconscious. So that's why I say it's important to reflect and to notice if there's one pattern, like let's say you always attract people who you feel like you need to fix, right? I would encourage you to say, well, what's that about? Is there some sort of belief that I have that I'm not worthy, or that I'm not good enough, or that the only way someone's going to be with me is if I'm needed and I fix them, right? So, I'm not saying this lightly. I know these are rather complex and deep topics, but I'm offering it to you because I trust that you understand on some level what I'm saying. And if you're curious about what I'm saying, then maybe you'll notice where that belief of I'm not worthy shows up in other areas of your life. So really noticing those patterns. And then the third thing, so again, intention, what are the type of relationships you have is number one to reflect on. Number two is what are the patterns that you notice in your current relationships? And then the third thing is really honestly, if you want to attract a person in your life who is all those things, authentic, positive, who's going to listen to you, who's receptive, a partner, a true partner in prosperity in all ways, you have to be that yourself first. So it's like if we want to attract that high vibe person, situation, thing, it's not going to happen if we're operating at a 2. It's not going to happen if we're walking around being negative, blaming people, shaming people, being critical and judgmental. It's not going to happen if we walk around as a victim. And it's not going to happen if we walk around as someone who wants to rescue everybody. So part of this, and I started the conversation with this, if you want to really love others, you have to love yourself. It starts always with us. And at the same time, if you want to attract that amazing, juicy, loving relationship into your life, then you must be that. You must be that. There's no other way. And if you're not that, you will continue to attract that which you are. And it's humbling sometimes to recognize that about ourselves. And yet it also is freeing, because once you have an awareness and you have an understanding, then you have something to work with, right? So it's important to give yourself the time and the space to really look and see what is it that you have cultivated, because what you have cultivated is exactly where you are. And that's why in other episodes as well, I've talked about, we have this idea sometimes that once we get that maybe perfect job or relationship, we're going to be happy. But if we're not happy today, it's not going to happen. So we have to start with where we are. We have to start by choosing to be happy in this moment and choosing to look honestly at our relationships, at the quality of our relationships. And then to be able to be willing to do the work. Because it is work. And I don't mean work in a bad way. Anything that you want in your life, that is amazing takes some kind of work. It takes some kind of effort and discipline, right? And knowledge and wisdom. So I want to leave you with this, something that I learned recently, actually. Some of us are highly emotional, right? So sometimes what happens in relationships is we get so triggered. We get so triggered that we allow our emotions to make the decisions. Meaning, we allow the emotion to cause us to either blow up, get angry, or maybe we do the opposite. Maybe we allow the emotions to cause us to avoid and disconnect and withdraw and choose maybe not to be in relationship. And there's other various behaviors in between those that we do sometimes to sabotage ourselves and our relationship. So we end up destroying the very thing that we want. And I have done this in my own life. So it's eye-opening. So this place of emotion, so we all have them. They come and go like the tide. I talk about all these practices of meditation to help us regulate and become more balanced. But here's what I'm going to leave you with. If you truly want a healthy relationship, a loving relationship, an amazing relationship, you have to be committed to that commitment more than your commitment to your feelings. So in those moments, in those dark moments, and I get them, I've been there. I'm a very passionate woman and I have a lot of emotion. When you are in those moments where your feelings are what feel like taking control of you, that is not the time to make a decision. That is the time to go inward and to do the work that you need to do. And sometimes it means you have to take some space, right? Physical space, emotional space, mental space. And you must commit to your commitment. Right? So your word, your commitment is all you have. That's all we have. And if you're committed to your commitment of having that healthy, loving, beautiful relationship, then you will naturally seek out and do the work of managing the emotions. Because in life, most of us do not achieve what we want because we get derailed by our emotional state and we make it a priority and we commit more to our emotions and our feelings than we do to our commitment. So I want to leave you with that because I find that most people don't even know they're doing it. So this isn't an opportunity to, again, put yourself into victim and beat yourself up and all that story, noticing if you're doing that. It's an opportunity to stand in your power, to take a stand for your life and yourself and what you want and commit to your commitments. I believe in you. As always, reach out if you want to stay connected, if you have a question. And if there's anything in particular about relationship that you would like me to discuss and dive more deeply into, would love to hear from you. Until next time, enjoy it, notice it. Let's go. What if I told you that everything in your life is a result of your choices? As we dive deeper into relationship, first we will breathe. So let us begin by taking our 3 conscious full breaths, inhaling, filling up. Exhale, let it go out of your mouth, release. Again, inhale, filling up. Exhale, let it go. And one more time, inhale, filling up. Exhale, let it go. So where do we stand with our relationships? In last week's episode on healthy relationships, I encourage you to look at the relationship you have with yourself, the intentions you have about cultivating healthy, happy relationships, and also some patterns that maybe you notice coming up in your relationships that either sabotage you or cause you to maybe not want to be in relationship or to have this idea or belief that relationships are hard and maybe they're not worth it, right? So today I want to go a little bit deeper into choice. And I started by saying, what if I told you that everything in your life is exactly what you have chosen? How do you feel about that? You still like me? That's okay if you don't. I'm here to be a mirror. I'm here to be real with you, to have an authentic conversation with you. In some cases, conversations that most people don't have, which is why I like to have them, because I want to offer you the opportunity to Be strong, to stand in your power, and to look at the stuff that needs to transform in order for you to live the life you want. And a big part of this conversation about happy, healthy, successful relationships is about our choices and how our choices impact the kind of relationship we have with ourselves and with others. There's a lot of illusions or fallacies out there about relationships and what they really are about. And I want to go a little bit deeper today into beliefs. And I want to give a specific example as to how our underlying unconscious beliefs can actually create a story that we live out, which generates a feeling, which results in a consequence. So it's almost like this treadmill that happens that we don't even know we're on. We don't even know we're on it. And then one day we wake up, we look at our life, and we are like, how did I get here? And if it's a challenging life circumstance, we might want to blame somebody else, right? Because if it's good, we did it, right? But if it's not good, that's not our fault. So I'm going to go through an example about how we get on this treadmill of belief and story that continues to create an outcome. And I'm also going to give you a new way of being. And before I do that, I want you to take a moment to listen to these words by Robert Bennett. Listen to these words. Your life is the sum result of all the choices you make, both consciously and unconsciously. If you can control the process of choosing, you can take control of all aspects of your life. You can find the freedom that comes from being in charge of yourself. How empowering and maybe terrifying, but that's all good. So let me get right to it. I'm going to use the example as it relates to not being worthy, so being in victim, because I have found that that's one of the popular ones. So let's say that we have this, and again, it could be unconscious, meaning you're not aware of it. So whether it's unconscious or conscious, it doesn't matter. The point is that there's this belief that somewhere along the way you learned, maybe when you were younger, that you're not worthy, that you are not enough. And it could be something that people have said to you. It could be how you were treated. There's many ways that we can end up feeling worthless and like a victim and powerless. So let's say this belief is an underlying belief, conscious or not. And from that belief, you have created a story, okay, around relationship, meaning you maybe say to yourself, good people leave, or there's no good men or women out there. There's some story that's connected to this belief of you not being worthy, of you being a victim. And this story of good people leave me, or relationships are hard, or whatever that is, generates a feeling, all right? So how the heck do you think you feel when you have that kind of a story? You probably feel negative. You feel maybe shame or guilt or sadness or powerless. You feel victim, 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 right? So that story generates a feeling. And what do you think you're attracting into your life with that feeling? If you're going about your life with this belief and this story generating these negative feelings, are you attracting the number 10? No, you are not. You are attracting the people that believe what you believe. So guess what? You end up with the same consequence or result you've always had, which is the people in your life that either leave or the people in your life that don't appreciate you because you don't feel worthy. So you are willing to accept anyone and anything into your life. Okay, so that's the treadmill that many of us get on. There's a belief that somehow creeps into our world, either conscious or not, and from that we create a story, which generates a feeling, which then generates a consequence. And that consequence, as we continue to attract those same people, what do you think that does to our belief in our story? It strengthens it. It strengthens it so that one day, this belief is so powerful and this story is so strong and these feelings are so intense. And remember what I said last time, if we're committed to our feelings, that's what's going to rule our life. We're always going to end up with the same consequence. So what do we do? How do we get off that insane, because it is insane, treadmill? Awareness. And good for you for listening to this podcast if you're still listening, which I hope you are. Because if you're getting triggered and you're not liking what I'm saying, more important for you to listen, right? So notice if the resistance is coming up as I'm saying these things. So what do we do instead? How do we get off this treadmill that keeps us exactly where we are and prevents us from getting to go where we want, right? So the only way to get a different result is to make a change, right? Make something different. So I'll even go a step further and say, it's actually not even about making a change, because when you make a change, you're starting with something, right? In order to make a change, you're starting with something that exists. And you either want more of it, you want less of it, or you want it to be different, right? And it takes a lot of energy to change. So here's what I'll offer you instead, since I think you can all handle it, and we all can handle it. How about creating something new? Because when you create something new, there's none of the past. It's a brand new, blank, open canvas. You get to create your belief that feeds what you want to create in your life. Because doesn't it make sense, if you really want that healthy, successful, loving, amazing, hot relationship, that you need to have a belief system that supports it? Yes. If you have an old belief system, it's much easier to let that old belief system go and to create something new to support where you are headed. So this is what you do instead. So noticing that you have this belief that you're not worthy and victim, it starts with noticing when that belief comes up, right? So noticing, awareness, when that belief comes up, you must interrupt it. Stop it. Literally stop the thought and have a different thought. So very simply, I am worthy. I am worthy. I am worthy. And that belief will interrupt the feeling that you generate and will shift the feeling. So the feeling of I am worthy and saying it until you believe it, will generate what type of feelings? Positive feelings, empowered feelings, feelings of peace, feelings that will generate a different consequence, because the energy that you're sending out with that feeling of positivity and happiness and strength and empowerment will have different people show up in your life. People that perhaps are that understand what it means to be respectful, to understand what it means to appreciate someone, to understand what it means to have a healthy, successful partnership, because that's what they're seeking. So that's how you do it. That's how you get off the treadmill, is when you notice that belief coming up of victim or I'm not worthy, and that story, you have to interrupt it. You have to stop and you have to take a breath, pause. This requires discipline, and generate a different belief. I am worthy of beautiful, amazing love. Make it into a statement, whatever works for you, and allow that statement to be your anchor, so that when that old belief appears, which it will, until you're completely free of it, until you completely let it go, it's a process, and you come back to that anchor of I am worthy. I have loving relationships in my life. It will continue to generate those feelings. And over time, those feelings will generate a different consequence. So this is important. And this is a very simple practice. And you can use it for any belief that you recognize about yourself. Any belief that, so it could be, again, the other side of victim is sometimes people rescue, right? And that still comes from, in some ways, a sense of not being worthy. Because if we feel like we have to rescue, there's something about us that doesn't feel worthwhile. Right? If we feel like we have to always rescue everybody else, well, what about us? What is that saying about us, right? It's like in the airplane, you put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help somebody else. So there's nothing noble about being a martyr. There's nothing noble about being a victim or someone who rescues, because you know what you're actually doing? You're actually sending a message that the other person is not capable. So instead of enabling people, another big buzzword, we need to empower people. But the only way we empower people is if we first empower ourselves. So we have to get uncomfortable. We have to be okay with the unknown. We have to be okay with the discomfort. And we have to be willing to commit to our commitment of the healthy, loving, happy relationship we want, or whatever it is that we want. We have to be more committed to our commitment than to our feelings, than to the discomfort. So that is how you interrupt the treadmill. That is how you interrupt those unconscious beliefs and conscious beliefs too. Some of us are very aware of them, in order to generate something different. So I encourage you, between last episode 20, when I talked about healthy relationships, and this episode, noticing everything in your life is a result of your choices. Everything. Even when we were children, we were not responsible for what happened to us. Today, as adults, we are responsible for what we do with it, whether we choose to look at it and heal it or not. There is no middle ground. With all due respect, there is no middle ground. We either choose to face it and we choose to live a life of love and happiness and empowerment or not. And it's not for everybody. So remember, as you go about this journey with relationships, that it's a choice. It's a choice to have healthy, happy relationships. And it's a choice to do the work, to cultivate those, to maintain those, to grow those, to generate those. And it starts with you. So you have to pay attention. And as you do, as always, I will remind you to be gentle with yourself, to be compassionate with yourself. This is not the opportunity to beat yourself up. This is the opportunity to be really curious and to be surprised. Because I can tell you, as I do this process in my life, because we have many beliefs about many things, it's actually freeing. It's actually freeing. Because your life is the sum result of all the choices you make, both consciously and unconsciously. And if you control the process of choosing, you can take control of all aspects of your life. You can find the freedom that comes from being in charge of yourself. And that, my friends, is how to live an empowered life. That is how you move from little me and my story to what am I here for and how can I serve? And that is the ultimate fulfillment. To recognize that we are more than ourselves, we are more than our work, we are more than our relationships, that we are all here for a purpose and for a reason. And the sooner that we can figure that out and understand that and operate from that mentality, the more our life will be fulfilling. I support you. As always, reach out to me, email me, find me on Instagram or Facebook with questions, with comments, with topics that you want to dive into more deeply. Let's go. What if I told you nothing ever goes away until it teaches us what we need to know? So today's topic is going to be a continuation of the past 2 episodes on relationship. And the reason why I am discussing relationships again is because I feel like I have awakened maybe some of you with some of the topics we were talking about around beliefs and patterns of behavior. And I feel it's important to give you a little bit more information and some tools to help you navigate your relationships. So something I wanted to get a little bit more deeply into today is this idea of how does our ego play a role in our relationship patterns? And really, what is ego, right? What is ego? I think there's a lot of confusion about what ego really is and if it's, quote, good or bad. And over the years, I've come to understand that it's really neither. It's simply a part of being human. And usually when we are in an ego or egoic state, we're identified with something. So it could be we're identified with a thought, we're identified with a thing, we're identified with a way of being. And I guess another word I could use for that is attachment. So what ends up happening is when ego is at play, sometimes we engage in patterns of behavior, as I mentioned last week, that we're not even aware of. Because the nature of ego is to typically be right. So the nature of ego, right, in its quest to be right, will often make someone else wrong or something else wrong. So it puts us in this place of polarity. It puts us in this place of divisiveness. It puts us in the place of me or me versus other, when really, if you believe, as I do, that we are all one. So when we are behaving from a way where we're sourcing from our ego, oftentimes this creates a lot of the pain, the emotional pain, in our relationships. And it causes us to maybe argue with somebody or create a conflict with somebody because the ego has this desire to create separation. And you may be, as I'm saying this, you may be saying to yourself, well, that just sounds nuts. Why would ego do that? That's a great question. And I think it's a question that you can continue to ask yourself. At this point, I want to help you shed light on perhaps some of the ways your ego is showing up in the relationship. So when I spoke last week about beliefs and how we create stories based on our beliefs, which then generate feelings and then generate consequences, that a lot of times the root of these beliefs stem from egoic patterns that we have developed or we have inherited. And one of the main ones, as I said earlier, is the need to be right. So if I need to be right about something, then often I'm making somebody else wrong. So what do you do about that? One thing you can do is think about when you find yourself in that situation, and this presents itself in all areas of our life, not just our most intimate love relationships, but just noticing, is there space for a win-win? Is there space that you can bring into your inner body to relax the body and relax the mind, to notice what is it about this need to be right? Is there something underneath that? Is there a fear that if you feel that you won't get what you want, is there a fear that you're going to lose control? So really understanding what the need is to be right is very eye-opening. And quite frankly, that could be one area of life that you focus on, right? Is noticing where that shows up. The other egoic pattern, in addition to the need to be right, which makes someone else wrong, is identifying with our mental positions. So remember that word identifying. And identifying with our mental positions, especially when it comes down to, if we have arguments or conflict, is that we aren't open. Right? So when we're identified with our, me, my mental positions, it doesn't give us room to look at another possibility or to try to understand where maybe somebody else is coming from. So in another way to say that is really being closed off, right? Having a closed mind and saying, well, this is how I am and this is how I've done it, or this is how I've learned. So again, it's very much connected to those beliefs, either conscious or unconscious, but just noticing in your life in situations where you are so identified with your mental position. And I don't talk politics, but we can clearly see right now that is a huge thing that's going on in society, is that when you have people and organizations and groups that are so identified with their mental positions, there is no room for conversation. And when there is no room for conversation, there is no room for connection, and there is certainly no room for creating win-wins and possibility, because we are so right. We are so identified with our mental position that if we even think about another possibility, then our ego goes, I'm going to lose. Right? I'm not in control, or there's some fear there. So noticing when those patterns come up in your life, whether personally or professionally. And then the other thing that I want to share, in addition to this need to be right and identifying with our mental positions and how we create separation, is sometimes we have a lot of emotional pain that comes up in relationship. And a lot of this emotional pain is past, right? It's past accumulated pain that we have either experienced ourselves when we were children or as adults, and also the collective pain of humanity. So I want to share with you a word and a concept that some of you might be aware of, that actually Eckhart Tolle speaks a lot about, and it's called the pain body. It's called the pain body. And I'm going to give you the definition, how he explains it, and it's from the book Stillness Speaks by Eckhart Tolle, and this is how he talks about the pain body. The pain body is an energy field within you that sporadically takes you over because it needs to experience more emotional pain for it to feed on and replenish itself. It will try to control your thinking and make it deeply negative. It loves your negative thoughts since it resonates with their frequency and so can feed on them. It will also provide negative emotional reactions in people close to you, especially your partner, in order to feed on the ensuing drama and emotional pain. So I encourage you, for those of you curious about this, and some of you may have sensed this already, that there are times when your reaction to a situation is way out of proportion to actually what has occurred, right? So we call that maybe a trigger. Like I said, Eckhart calls it a pain body. So when you notice yourself having a reaction that seems bigger or feels bigger than what is, quote, logical, it's often that it is triggering your pain body, which is an accumulation of past pain that shows up in your energy field. So without getting too complicated with the terminology, I want to bring it back to simplicity, and that egoic patterns, the root of these patterns can be changed. They can be transformed once you become aware, right? So that's what you do. How do you free yourself from these patterns that cause the pain to come up? How do you free yourself from these egoic patterns? And it's simple. You start to become aware. You start to notice where you're getting triggered. You start to notice where you need to be right, where you're identifying with your mental positions because you don't want to hear somebody else's side of it, where you're looking to create separation, right? And that's an interesting one because a lot of people, myself included, having studied yoga for many years and practice, we talk about yoga meaning union, right? That's the definition of yoga, right? So it's interesting when we can practice yoga and feel connected to ourselves and to others, but then maybe we leave the yoga room and somebody does something to us and we're like, oh God, how could they do that? Or maybe we do something to somebody else, right? We cut them off on the road, or we have road rage. And it's like, wow, that's interesting. I just practiced yoga for an hour and a half and we're all one, right? So if I do something to you, I'm doing it to me. Yet when I leave the yoga room, I'm behaving that way. So it can be really subtle. And then of course it could be extreme, where in situations we have seen over the years where people actually act out violently against somebody else because they believe them to be so different and wrong, right? So I'm going to leave that there. So what do? We become aware. Number one, we become aware. Number two, we witness, right? So we start to witness. You get curious about how these patterns show up, not only in yourself, but in your partner or the people that you're dealing with, the people that you have these challenges with. You witness it, meaning when I say witness is you do not react. You act as if you're watching a movie and you get curious about the behaviors. And then the third thing, once you become aware and you witness, you stop feeding it. And what feeds it? What feeds the emotional pain? What feeds the pain body? You guessed it, your thoughts. Your thoughts. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that we are the creators. We are the creators. And we create every single day by our thoughts. So becoming mindful of the power that we have to create our reality by choosing to focus on certain thoughts is an important step in this process. So noticing in your life where you're feeding the pain body. And over time, as you practice becoming aware, witnessing it in yourself and others without reacting, and then stop feeding it, eventually it loses its charge, meaning it loses energy because you're not feeding it, right? Think about that. What you feed grows. What you feed grows. So these concepts are simple, yet I understand can be complicated and challenging when we actually practice, right? So that's the place of action, is once you reflect and become aware, you can actually make a different choice because you are the creator and your thoughts create your life. And whatever you create is who you become. So this isn't something that is in one area of your life. And I've said this before, that the way we do one thing is the way we do many things. So recognizing this, and as always, be compassionate with yourself, be honest with yourself, and try to enjoy the process, adding a little bit of levity, as I always say, adding a little bit of levity. So as you journey through your relationships, remember that nothing ever goes away until it teaches us what we need to know. And that, my friends, is a blessing and a gift. Let's go. If you find this podcast helpful and if it provokes you in any way, meaning you love what I have to say, or maybe you don't like it because it triggers you, awesome. I've moved something in you, and perhaps you will want to share this with someone else in your life who might be interested in being moved. So you can find us on Apple, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. And as always, feel free to share links with people you love, because remember, we are in relationship with each other. So the more that you are present and you invite other people on the journey, the more peaceful world we will live in, because we will be together understanding these concepts. So I thank you for your support, and you help us keep the show going by sharing it, by liking it, by giving us reviews, and helping us to grow. Thank you.